Hello everyone, this is a tutorial with regards to dinosaurs for the Ark Dev Kit. I'm going to try and cover as much as possible on this one. I'm not sure how many parts this might be in, but to start with, I wanted to make this because a lot of the Dev Kit tutorials on YouTube at the moment are a little out of date. Some are poor quality, some you can't see the different settings in, so I wanted to try and put some of my experience of making animals in Ark onto video to help some new people. So here we go. First thing you've got to consider when you're looking to make a new dino is what is it that you actually want to do with this dino? Is it just a very small change? Are you just going to change maybe the size of the mesh or the speed at which the animal runs or something very simple? In which case you could probably make a very simple child of the original dino and it would be a very easy mod for you. We'll run through that. Or is there more complicated things that you need to do? And if so, what's going to be the best way to do that? Okay, so essentially I'm going to try and run through all the different ways that I know of and what you can do with them, and go in a little bit more into depth as to making your animal look and feel right within the world. So we're going to start off with a really simple one. It's going to be a sheep. Now, I've got a tutorial mod just set up, just the primal game data and a level. There's loads of tutorials to teach you how to do that, so I'm not going to bother. First thing I'm going to do, though, is just make a folder for a sheep. Really simply, all I'm going to be doing is using the ovis. And all I want to do on this is just make some very basic changes to the character. It's actually called sheep in this, or where are we? Okay, so we've got the main sheep character. So we're just going to drag that into our folder, and we're just going to make a child. So when we drag it in, we get the option to copy, move, or create child. So I'm just going to create a child there. And what this has done now, it's created a blueprint for me, and this blueprint is a direct descendant of the parent, which is the sheep character BP. I'm just going to rename it. And then give it a save. Okay, now the only thing I want to do for this sheep is I want to make it so it's not incredibly slow. Okay, I want to be able to tame sheep and ride them and have them go fast. So the only thing I'm going to be changing here is going to be the walking speed of the actual dino itself. Okay, so let's see. So the max walk speed currently is set to 100. So I'm going to set that to 200. I'm going to save it. And then I'm also going to change something else. Let's see. I'm going to change the name of it. So instead of the ovis, it's going to be sheep. So I know that my sheep is different to the ovis. Just compile this and save it. Okay. And now if I just go into the editor, I should be able to tame this sheep, and when I ride it, it should go much faster than a normal sheep would. They were never hugely fast to start with, but as you can see there, that was much faster. Let's just go back in and look at speed as the, okay. Okay, so I think that's all we needed to change there. I can make it go even faster, say if we moved it to 500. And then just go into the editor. Okay. So now I should be flying around on this sheep. But as you can see, the animations don't really fit in. You can see that the sheep is sliding along the ground. So what's really, it doesn't look right. Yeah, it did the job, and when it moved to 200, it didn't look too bad. But now at 500, I'm sliding when I'm walking. It's no good. But if I just wanted to change something very simply like that, or just change the name, or if I wanted to perhaps scale the mesh slightly, okay, so we could, let's get the mesh for this animal and take a copy of that. Now we are going to take a copy of the mesh. If I can find my folder, here we go. And I'm going to just rename this sheep tutorial. And now when I open the mesh, as you can see, it's showing all of the different things you can add to it. But in the scale, I'm going to make the sheep 1.5 times as big as it normally would be. So the sheep is now bigger, and in the actual sheep character, I'm going to use my mesh rather than the vanilla one. Okay. So now I should have a really fast sheep with quite a large size to it. There we go. It's actually bigger than me and still ridiculously fast. Okay, so now what I might want to do is, now my very basic changes to an animal have been done, I want to actually be able to spawn that into the game. Okay, so in my primal game data, I don't want the normal sheep to spawn in game, I want my sheep to spawn in game. Okay, so I'm going to open up my primal game data, and I'm simply just going to remap the sheep. So here where it says remap NPC, I'm going to use my sheep as the to class, and here I'm going to find the Ovis character, or the normal sheep character. Eventually. So creating a child is useful for a number of reasons. Okay, you don't need to do anything with animations or anything like that. Any changes to the main sheep parent blueprint would automatically filter down into yours. Okay, you don't need to mess around with materials or anything like that. You've literally just increased the size of a mesh. You've changed it to to fit with your character. You've changed the speed to match, and you've got a big sheep now that you can ride around at speed, and we can just put that into the game and replace the normal sheep. If we want to do anything more than that, say for instance we want to change the sound effects of the sheep, or we want to change how heavy it hits the ground when it runs and the sound of that, then we can't do that with a child. We'd have to make a copy. So that's what we're going to look at next. So we'll select sheep. So the sheep character BP, it goes in there. And now when my primal game data is loaded onto a map, any normal sheep that are spawned will be replaced with my. Okay. So the next thing we're going to look at is making an actual copy of a dinosaur, and this is going to give us a much greater scope to change some things on it. So I think what we'll do this time is we'll go for something like a Rex. How about a Rex? Now Rexes are pretty good to learn with. They're very simple creatures. There's not a lot of there's no graphing on them. There's nothing really complicated about them. So we'll just go through the process and we'll make it a Rex. So I'm going to search for Rex to get the files that we want. Okay, so there's obviously a million different Rex files here. So not Dodo Rex. Wow. Okay, so the Rex character BP, we're going to want that. And we're going to take a copy of it this time. Okay. Now, I'm going to turn blueprint filters off. Okay. We're also going to want a copy of the mesh. So let's find that. And let's move that into our folder as well. Okay, now when we open the Rex mesh, we can see that there's a skeleton assigned here. Okay, so we're going to get a copy of the skeleton as well, and move that into our mod folder. And make a copy of that. So now we have 3 items in here. We have a skeleton, we have a skeletal mesh, and we have the character blueprint. So I'm just going to rename them. Okay, so we've got our Rex character blueprint here, and we can automatically see that because we've made a copy of the blueprint, there is a warning now due to the compilation. Okay, now these generally come from some graph work on the dinosaur, which is when you've copied across the graph, it's not going to function correctly anymore. Okay, now we can see here that we're unable to find the function named pressed alt fire, which means that we're unable to do some other things. Okay, however, this looks like it's actually a function of the dino tech helmet. And generally, when you've only got a warning like this, all you need to do to fix it is replace the function. So pressed alt fire, if we pull off the blue pin and just type in press, we get the pressed alt fire button, and then we replace the function in the graph. And now when I compile it, this shouldn't be an error anymore. Okay, so we can see that pressed alt fire is no longer an issue. So let's have a look through some of the others. So it looks like all the functions that were being called from the tech helmet just need replacing. Okay, so local do attack. Okay, we can replace this from the true pin to here, and the return value of the boolean goes into here, and then this replaces this. We can get rid of the original and replace it with ours. Then we go to here, set targeting. Again, this is coming from this cast. We drag it across and set targeting. The function rather than the integer. Okay, so now this comes from the true path. Targeting enabled is checked. And then this goes in here. And then we can replace the original. So if we compile now, we should get rid of 2 of these errors. And again, we'll go to the next one. Again, this is just set targeting. So we're just going to replace the links. It's not checked. And we just compile to make sure that this disappears. And then finally, we have a deactivate helmet function here that's not working as well. There we go. So this just comes off the true pin. Delete that. And now the blueprint should compile without any warnings. Okay. So now we've fixed some of the issues that we had in our graphs. We can get rid of that page. We don't need to be there anymore. Okay. So because we're using a copy, okay, if we want to make some deep changes to the dino itself, we're going to need to be using our own mesh on our own skeleton. Okay. So we're not going to be using the vanilla assets at all. We're just taking copies of them and then making alterations to those copies to be used in our mod. First thing we'll need to do is create a rig for our skeleton. And you can do that by right-clicking it, and when it says create rig. It will ask you, would you like to add the following bones to the skeleton? Just click OK. And then if you open this blueprint and save it, then you can close it. Okay. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to open the skeleton, and where you see Retarget Manager here, we're going to click that once, and it's going to ask us to set up a rig. Okay, so what we're going to do on this little graph box here, we're just going to click that, and we're going to select the rig that we've just created. So Rex Skeleton Tutorial Rig that I've just created. Okay, and then finally I'm going to click Save Pose. Now I can close this down. Then save the skeleton. And that's our skeleton with a rig. Next, we're going to right click on the skeletal mesh, and we're going to go to skeleton and assign skeleton. And in here, we're going to search for our tutorial skeleton, or however you named your skeleton. So I've got Rex Skeleton Tutorial here. I'm just going to accept this. Now, if I open up the mesh and save it, we can see here that my tutorial mesh is using the tutorial skeleton. Okay, now this dino as it is not going to work because we don't have any animations for our skeleton. All the animations are for the base vanilla game Rex skeleton. So we're going to need to find our Rex, which I believe is down here. Now in here, we're looking for two things. First thing is the Rex Anim BP. We're going to right click it, and we're going to select retarget anim blueprints, duplicate anim blueprints and retarget. Okay, we're going to unclick show only compatible skeletons, and we are going to search for the skeleton that we've created, and I'm going to select it. So now we have retargeted the anim blueprint to our skeleton, and what that will have done is it will have made a copy of that anim blueprint in our folder. The next thing we want to do is if we go back to the Rex folder, there'll be an animations folder. And what you want to do here is you want to select them all. So if you select the first one, scroll down to the bottom, hit shift and select the last one. That will select them all for you. And then if you right click, and again, we'll go to retarget anim assets, duplicate anim assets and retarget. And we'll just click that. Again, we're going to uncheck show only compatible skeletons, and we're going to find our skeleton. And we're going to hit select. And this is going to retarget all of those animations to our own skeleton. So if we go back to our folder now, you'll be able to see that all of these have been moved across into our folder. Now, the quickest way to go through and save all these is just to click File, Save All. Okay, so that's all the assets that have now been saved into our Rex folder. Now, this is a bit, they're everywhere. So what I'm going to do now, very simply, I'm just going to make a folder. I'm going to call it animations. And I'm just going to move all of those animations into that folder. Okay, so I'm going to select everything, but what I don't want to move into that folder is the skeleton, the rig, the mesh, the character, and the anim BP. Okay, the rest I am going to move into the animations folder, and the way I'm going to do that is selecting them all, drag them to the folder, and then move here. Okay, so now that the dev kit's finished, it should move all of those animation files into our folder. There we go. All right, so the first thing we're going to open now is the anim blueprint. The first thing you'll notice is that our Rex isn't looking very healthy. Okay, so what we're going to be looking to do here, and I'll just enlarge this a little bit, is to open the asset override editor. Okay, if you don't have this, you'll be able to find it in window, asset override editor. Okay, and then on the anim graph, you're just going to click the button there, and what you'll see here is the animations that the vanilla blueprint uses. So we're going to want to change these to our animations. Okay, so in our animations folder, we're going to find the relevant ones. So if we first search for idle, you can see Rex idle copy and Rex swim idle copy. So this is just Rex idle, so we use Rex idle copy. Here, let's look at the move ones. Okay, so Rex move forward, we'll use the copy. Rex move left, we'll use the copy. Rex move right, we'll use the copy. We've got an aim offset here, so we'll use the copy. And you're just going to go through and replace them all with the ones that are in your folder. Once you've replaced them all, and you can see here that they all have copy next to them, you can save the blueprint and compile it. Okay, so now that the blueprint has compiled, this is the first test. If you've followed all the steps correctly up to now, your Rex should actually look like a Rex. And it should be animating properly. Okay, so now we're going to close down the anim blueprint. We're going to close down the skeleton. We don't need that right now. Okay, now the first thing we want to do is, you can see here there are some montages. Okay, these are also animations that we need to actually change in the character blueprint as well. So I'm just going to search for anim, and that will bring up any animations that are in the character blueprint itself. Okay, so now I'm just going to search for montage in my animations folder, and here are all the montages that are retargeted to our skeleton. So the first thing I'm going to replace is Rex Startled Right montage. So that's the Rex Startled Right montage. Rex Startled Left montage. And we're just going to scroll down and replace all of these. The Cuddle montage. The Lay Egg montage. Startled Left montage. Startled Right again. The Raw montage. And the Lay Egg montage. Here. We'll save this as we go. Rex Bite 2 montage. And again, we're just searching for the name and the appropriate one with copy at the end for ourselves. These ones that say TPV, no weapon, Rex stand idle, because it doesn't say montage, we're not going to replace them. Sorry, because it's not the Rex itself, this is the actual player. So we're not going to change those. We're only going to change the ones with Rex on them. And we're at the end of the blueprint now. So that's all our montages up to date. So we'll compile the blueprint. Okay, so in this instance, what I am going to be doing with our Rex is I'm going to be making the Rex smaller, and I'm going to be making the Rex more like a juvenile Rex size. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to half the size of the mesh. So whatever the mesh is set to at the moment, which is 2.43, I'm going to be setting mine to 1.21 in all three. If I save that, now when I put my Rex character in here and press play, we still have a normal size Rex. Because what I haven't done is made my Rex character blueprint use our mesh. Okay, so let's do that now. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to change here is the mesh to our skeletal mesh. And straight away you could see there that the anim blueprint generated class changed to none. And we're going to replace it with our own animation blueprint. Now if we save and compile, you see now our Rex is decidedly skinnier. Okay, so now we've got a smaller Rex. What we want to do now is we're going to need to change some of the stats for this dino. If you look into the components page for the dinosaur, you'll see that it has a status component, dino character status BP Rex. And in here you can see the base stats for a level 1 Rex. Okay. Now because our Rex is half size, I'm going to want to reduce some of these statistics, but I don't want to do it directly in here because this is the vanilla Rex's status component. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that asset. So it's dino character status Rex. Okay. So we've got the Dodo Rex in here, the Alpha Rexes, but this is the dino character status component that is currently in our modded dino. So we're going to take a copy of this into our mod folder. Okay. So now we have a new status component. We're going to rename it so we can tell them apart. Okay. So now that this is saved, we're going to open it up. And as you can see here, this is exactly the same as what you see here. Okay, so in our blueprint, we're going to go into the max status and we're going to, well, it's half the size, so it's half the health. Maybe not as much stamina, say 300. It's not going to take as much to knock out, so we'll say 750. Oxygen could stay the same. Food doesn't really matter either way. We could probably reduce it to 1500. Water, you don't need to worry about, and maybe it won't be able to carry as much. We only be able to carry half as much. And if we save this and compile it, we can see now that the status component that we've created has our new figures in it, and we're going to close both the status component and the character BP. And now we're going to reopen the character BP, and on our components tab, we're going to add the component that we've just created. Dino character status Rex tutorial is mine. But the next thing I'm going to do is on the original one, I'm going to right click it and delete it from the character. Save it and compile it. Okay, so now when we look at our stats, we have the altered stats in here. Okay, if I want to mess around with these when I'm testing or if I'm trying to balance the creature, I can just update the details in here. Say I want to change that to 600 rather than 550. Save it, compile it, and straight away you can see now that we've got the star asterisk on the Rex saying that this needs to be compiled. And saved. And now our status values will reflect the changes that we've made. What this will also help with is making sure that when you're breeding these creatures, that the values are using your status component rather than the vanilla one. Another thing that we can look at here is if we look at the dino inside its capsule, which is this, okay, the capsule component, you can see that the capsule component was originally sized for the larger Rex, and it's probably a little bit too big for this Rex. So we can actually change this size of it, okay? Now, the half height, we've halved the size of the dino. So we can probably half both of these to make it fit the dino. So 135 and 112. Let's just check the original Rex. So when things like that happen, we can check what the original values were. So the capsule component is 270 and 215. So we're halving those to 135. And as you can see, it just covers the Rex's legs essentially. Yeah. So we want to try and replicate that in our smaller Rex. So we've got 135 and 112, but we can see that this is not really positioned as our mesh was, okay? And we can fix that with these. This determines where the Rex is in location to the capsule component. You can see that this is a subsidiary of this, if you like. Okay. And essentially, because we're halving everything, this would probably be around about 33, and this would be around about minus 135. Now, this is negligible, but now you can see that our status component, our capsule component is in approximately the same position as the base games. So once we're happy with that, we can save it and compile it. So we've got a smaller Rex. There's a couple of things that we're going to need to change on this Rex to make it look and fit within the game world correctly. Okay. Now, the first thing is probably going to be the walking speed. Okay. So, whereas a fully grown, fully sized Rex will walk at 515 units, okay, ours is only half as big. So to make our animations look right, so it's not sliding on along the floor like the sheep was, we'll probably half this as well. So around about 260. Okay. So now when we press play, our Rex should act like just a miniaturized version of the Rex. The animations should look right, and it should walk correctly. So as you can see there, a couple of things really stand out. Okay, it was walking correctly. The walking speed seemed correct for it, but what didn't seem right was the noise that it was making while it was walking, and also the particle effects of the dust being kicked up. They looked like they were from a much larger animal. So that's what we're going to look at next. Okay, so we're going to go back into our blueprint. So let's look at sounds first. Okay. So here straight away we can see the footstep sounds. We've got two. We've got the move cue, and we've got Gen Water footstep heavy one cue. Okay. We're going to create a folder and call it sounds. And the first thing we're going to look at here is the PW Gen Water footstep heavy 01 cue. We're going to search for it using the magnifying glass, and we're going to take a copy of this blueprint into our sounds folder. We're going to rename it. And we're going to open it up. Now, this is generally what our cue files will look like. And if you press play, you can see that this is all quite loud. Okay. The easiest way to change this is in the modulator. If you click on it, where you've got volume minimum and volume maximum, we just halve these figures. So this will be 0.33 and this will be 0.5. So our half size dino will make half the amount of noise in this particular cue. Once that's done, we go back into our character blueprint and we replace the original with our copy. And we're going to look to do that on all of the sounds that are essentially in this blueprint to start with. Okay, so we've got the move cue. So let's search for that. And now we've essentially we're in the Rex folder and we've got all of these cues. Okay, we're not going to change these files. We're not even going to copy these into our directories. These are just base game files that we'll be using, but we will be taking copies of all the cue files and moving those into our sound folder. Okay, so I'm going to go through and rename all these. I'm getting lazy. I'm just going to put TUT at the end of them. Okay, so now we've got all the sound files or the cues copied into our mod folder, and we're just going to go into each of them and we're going to cut the sound in half, essentially. Okay, so although this is quite loud, okay, when a Rex attacks, we only want it to be half as loud. Now, on the previous one, we had a modulator button, okay, which allows us, so anything that goes through here, for the volume to be reduced by half, okay. This one doesn't have one. So we just drag off and we create a modular and we replace the output. Now in here, where the modulator says 0.95 to 1.05, we can change this to something like 0.48 to 0.52. Okay, and now when our Rex attacks, it's going to be much quieter. Okay, and we're just going to go through all of these and just half the sound. If they don't have modulators, we add them in. Okay, so there's all our sound files with half of the volume. Okay, I'm just going to close all these down. But we notice that when we look at our Rex and we're looking for where the sounds are coming from, you can see that there's only a few of the actual sound files that are actually in the blueprint itself. Okay, and we can also see that there's some others here that we didn't pick up earlier. So the large move water cue, we can grab that as well. And again, we're just going to change the modulator in here. So 0.35 to 0.5. Okay. So the large move water cue we can change to our own one. Rex Hercu, we can change to our own one. The drag body and drag release, we will leave, okay? As well as the poop queue. Let's not mess with that. The Rex death queue we can change. And the Rex move queue we can change. Okay. So now we've replaced all of the sounds in the blueprint, but there's a lot more that we're going to need to replace. And they're found in the actual animations themselves. So let's close our character blueprint for now. And if we go to our animations, okay, and we just open the first one, okay. So you can see here on this first blueprint that in the notifies here, there is nothing. There is no sounds attached to this animation. And that's because it's just aiming to the center. You've got a list of all of the animations that are associated with our skeleton and our mesh listed here in the asset browser. Okay, so we're just going to click through them one at a time and see if there's any sounds or any sound files in here that we're looking to change. Now I know that there are no sound files at all with regards to the aim, so the first one that's going to have a sound file attached to it is going to be our bite animation. And you can see here, click on the attack. Just pause that for a second. If we click on the notifies tab on the attack queue, we get some details here. And you can see here in the details, the sound file associated with this is Rex attack queue. So we go into our sounds file. We find our reduced volume version and we replace it. And if we save it, now when we continue, it's going to be much more realistic for the size of the dinosaur. And we continue to do that all the way through. So, this is our charge animation. Now, we can see here that it's obviously creating a particle and also a sound. So let's change the sound to start with. And we'll come back to the particles a little later in the tutorial. Okay. As you can see, I'm not going into the montages because there generally aren't any Sound files are being associated with montages. This is where we add melee strings and things like that. So I'm just going through the green folder, the green animations. Okay, so here's another file that has a sound associated with it. I don't think these animations are in the game. Another thing that's good to look at here, you can see here that this idle cue does not play every time that the animation loops. It only plays on a percentage of times. So, you know, when you've got things like the Megalosaurus, who are incredibly noisy, especially if you've got a barn full of them, you can actually reduce the amount of times that this plays by reducing this chance to play here. So if we wanted the idle cue to only run at a fifth of this amount of times, we change this to 0.01, and we can reduce the percent chance to play on any animation. But we're just going to leave it as is for now. And we're going to continue to go through and replace them. Okay, so now we've gone through all of the animations and we're using our sound files on each of the animations to reduce the sound of our dino by half, essentially. Because it's only half as big, it shouldn't be making that much noise. Okay. The chance that we play some of these sounds, you can be found here in percent chance to play, so have a play around with that. Okay. But what we did notice earlier on as well, okay, is when we are charging, our dinosaur is kicking up a huge amount of dust here, okay? And the particle system is the reason for that, okay? So each time the animation goes through, we get a footstep and a footstep here. We get camera shake applied, and we also get a particle system spawned at the point at this socket, okay? So what we can do is we can find a smaller particle system to replace this with, okay? So if we click the drop down here, we can see this is a large 2. So if we change this to medium, and then change this one to medium, we can see the particle system's much reduced, a bit more realistic for a dinosaur this size. And again, we would go through and change those in each of our animations. Yeah. So these are medium. Doesn't look like this one took. So let's go in here. We can see that our particle system's now a bit more realistic for a dinosaur of the size that we have. Okay. Now obviously you can go through all of the different. So what was the one where he fell over? Torpid in. So if we look at this, there's huge particles where the dino falls down. So let's look at replacing this with something maybe not quite as big. How about this one? Nope, that's not quite big. How about this small one? That seems a little bit better. As we can see now, okay, so we'll save that. Obviously it's going to be up to you to go through all of the different animations, choosing particle systems that match your dino, choosing things that seem to be the correct size and the correct impact, so your dino doesn't look stupid when it's in the world. Okay. Okay, so our next step, we still need to do some work to make this a fully functioning dino. Okay. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this dino has a realistic attack. Like, it's only half the size, so maybe it only does half the damage. So if we just look at our attack area, we should search for attack. We can see here the attack name of bite, attack range of 1200. Okay, Attack interval 0.4 seconds. Okay, so it can essentially attack twice a second. All right, and down towards the bottom, you can see the damage type of the dino. You can see its swing sockets, and these relate to the skeleton and the animations. You can see the animation that we'll be using for our attack. And when you choose this attack, if there's more than one of these animations, you would add a weight to it. So say 50% for one, 50% to the other. Okay. And you can also see things like the damage amount, the impulse. This is the force it's the force of the attack that acts on another body. Okay, so the knockback, if you like. Okay, and the radius. Okay, so if we're going to go on our journey of halves, let's reduce this to 31. Let's reduce the swing radius to 150. Okay, and let's reduce this to 64,000. Okay. The attack offset we should also reduce by half. And let's see here. The attack range we should also reduce by half. Okay. Attack interval we can leave the same. We still want it to be able to attack the same rate, but we don't want it to attack with the same range or have the same power as its older brother, shall we say. Okay. The second attack we've got in here is the roar attack. Now, the roar doesn't actually do any damage, so I'm quite happy to just leave that as it is. We've changed the only things that matter, which is the volume of it and such. And then we have the AI bite. Okay, so this, again, we are going to reduce the range down to 600. And essentially go through and reduce everything as it was in the previous one. Okay, now we would expect that to work. Okay, but what we're going to see here is a very common issue, and that it might not reach me to be able to bite me. Okay. Now, what's happened there is the dino isn't getting within range to attack us. Even though it's half the size and we've reduced everything by half, there's still something missing. And that is actually in the artificial intelligence blueprint for the dino. So if we look at AI, down at the bottom here, you'll have the Rex AI controller BP. Okay, so we're going to take a copy of that. I'm going to move it into our folder, and we're going to take a copy. Of course, we're going to rename it. And in our AI blueprint, we're going to look for something called range. Let's see. The attack range here was set to 1200. So we're actually going to reduce that down by half to 600. Okay. Now, you may need to play with these values a little bit. Okay, it's not an exact science. But now If we replace the vanilla Rex AI controller with our own, it should mean that the Rex is able to attack us as a Rex would normally do. So if we hit play now, still having some issues, but we're getting there. It can attack us, just. Okay. So just by playing with those values, you might need to tweak them slightly one way or the other, but you're based on your dinosaur and how your dinosaur acts, you're going to need to play with those values, especially the one in the AI, to make sure that it actually gets to you before it tries to attack. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is if you're going to have your animal in the world, you're going to want to be able to breed them. Okay, so if we look into our Rex character and we search for egg, we can see here that the base egg class is primal item consumable egg. The egg items to spawn, primal item consumable egg Rex, and the fertilized egg item here. So we're going to take, we don't need to touch this one, but we're going to take a copy of these two. So the primal item consumable egg Rex and egg Rex fertilized. Yeah. I'm going to take a copy of those two and drop them into our folder as copies. Okay, we're going to rename them as usual. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is going to look at our primal item consumable egg. Okay, now our egg it's a Rex egg, so we can call this our tutorial Rex egg. Okay, and we can see here that we've got a dropped mesh override scale. Now, if the normal egg is ×4, our egg, only half the size, should be size ×2. Okay, and you can change the spoiling time in here and all the different values for the egg. Okay, but essentially that's all you need to do for the unfertilized version of the egg. Okay, you could maybe change the, if you wanted to make your dinosaur really protective of its eggs, you could increase its aggro radius based on when someone picks up an egg. Okay, next we're going to look at the fertilized version of the egg. Okay, so again, we want to reduce the scale of this to 2 times. Okay, and it's a fertilized tutorial Rex egg. But we also need to change in here a couple of things. Okay, so when this dino is born, we don't want a normal Rex to spawn. We want our own tutorial Rex to spawn. Compile it and save it. And now we've got our 2 eggs made. So we can replace these. So the normal egg we can replace there, and the fertilized egg we can replace here. And we compile and save our Rex character blueprint. Okay. So the next thing we want to do with this Rex is we don't want to replace the normal Rexes on the maps with our Rex. We want ours to be an additional Rex. We want it to spawn as well as the vanilla games. Okay. So what we'll do in this instance is in our primal game data, where before we were looking at NPC or remaps we put in, didn't we? Okay, so we've got our sheep character in there. Okay, we are going to look for NPC this time. Okay, and where you see the NPC spawn entries container additions. Okay, we're going to click on this. We're going to create an element here by clicking the plus button. Okay, now the spawn entries container is the area or the spawner within the map that we want to use to spawn our dino. So I think one of the main ones is grasslands. Okay, and you can spawn, there we go. So we've got some dino spawn entries here. So we've got grassland, and I've obviously got some others here. Okay, but we're gonna just use the base spawn entries of grassland for our dino. Okay, and where it says additional NPC spawn entries, we're going to click plus there. And this is going to be our tutorial Rex. The NPC to spawn is going to be our Rex. Okay. We're going to add a weight to it. Oh no, apologies. The percentage chance that this dino will spawn when a dino can be spawned, we could leave this at something like 0.2. So there's a 20% chance when there's a dino ready to spawn that our Rex is going to spawn in this container. And then we would also look at the entry weight. Okay, so here, what I generally tend to do is keep the percentage chance and the weight the same. And what this would mean, it would mean there was a 20% chance that this would be called. Okay, and then the weighting for this dino would be 20% as well. Okay, the rest of this, the spawn offsets and such, you can leave. You don't need to touch them. Okay. And if you wanted to change things like the difficulty levels, or if you wanted to change the min and max levels, you could do so in this part here. But if we save this now, when we load our mod onto any map that has the grasslands as an entry, our Rexes should spawn.